And we're back with another interesting interview on THC Legal Group. Get ready. Hi, Lyn. Okay, so welcome back to THC Legal Group. We're really excited to have you on our podcast. Why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself and tell everyone, who you are and kind of what you're all about.
Yeah, hi, I'm Lyn Ulbricht. My son is Ross Ulbricht, who is in prison right now, serving a double life sentence for all nonviolent charges for his role or his alleged role in Silk Road, the website that operated on the internet and sold many items, legal and illegal, such as drugs. And to be clear, Silk Road, unlike many of the open markets that are now on the internet, had some restrictions. It wasn't completely a free-for-all. It didn't, because the Silk Road administration did not want to allow things that harm people in their view. And so no child pornography was allowed. No violence, like assassinations, could be bought there. No stolen property. However, drugs were allowed because in their point of view, it was a free choice to be able to do that. And to be clear also, it was not easy to get on Silk Road from the layman's point of view. It was, you had to open a Bitcoin account, you had to know how to deal with that, and you also had to know how to operate on Tor. So it was completely anonymous, and it used digital cryptocurrency. So it's pretty difficult.
That's interesting. Well, what?
It wasn't just Amazon.
Well, what precisely do you think the government was opposed to with Silk Road? Was it specifically what they were selling, or did they? Do you think the government was concerned about the lack of control that they had over this digital marketplace? What, in your mind, was kind of some of the underlying reasons for Ross's prosecution?
That's a good question because I've kind of evolved in my opinion about that. I do not think it was about drugs. I don't, and the reason I don't, what finally clinched it for me was what the other offenders who were involved in Silk Road, the sentences they got. So, for example, Jan Slomp, who was the biggest drug dealer on Silk Road, got 10 years. The Stephen Sadler, who is the biggest cocaine and heroin dealer on Silk Road, got 5 years. The guy operating Silk Road 2.0 was recently arrested. He got 8 years. So there's a big discrepancy between 10 years and double life plus 40 years without parole.
Absolutely. So did Ross... I'm sorry, just so everyone is clear. So what was Ross's role specifically? Did he create Silk Road? How involved was he in kind of the mechanical underpinnings of the marketplace?
Well, that was actually never completely determined at trial because the defense was shut down. And his lawyer did say he created it. I didn't ever hear Ross say it, but at trial, but... in any case, Ross was not a programmer. He wasn't schooled in that. He didn't grow up with computers. We didn't have them in the house until much later. He studied physics and material science, so he was not a particularly skilled programmer. He was very interested in free markets, very, passionate about the idea of having people have experience of an open marketplace without government control. He was very much of a libertarian / I guess you could say anarchist, but that's a very loaded word. But Austrian economics guy, and so the defense's case is that he created it from a concept initially, got out, and actually Ross told me he went on to work on a Bitcoin exchange, and he was working on that, and then was set up later as the fall guy. And actually, the defense was pursuing that theory with a government witness, with government evidence, that there was another potential perpetrator that they had a lot of information on, Mark Carpellis, who ran the now closed Mt. Gox Bitcoin exchange, and actually, I don't know if he's actually proven or just suspected of stealing a lot of that money, but in any case, that was shut down. And that's one of the issues in the appeal, is that we have the right to defend ourselves, and it wasn't allowed in that trial. And one of the ways it wasn't allowed was that the defense was not permitted to fully cross-examine the government's witnesses. And there's a 3-minute video on the homepage of our website, freeross.org, where I explain this in detail about that, and how you can see how it was shut down very clearly. And it wasn't the only case that was shut down, but the whole trial, the defense was not permitted to bring expert witnesses to challenge the government's testimony. I mean, there were a lot of problems with that trial. And that's
right.
one of the issues I tried to bring up, because this puts us all in peril. If we don't have fair trial, whether you like the defendant, you don't like the defendant, you think he's guilty, you think he's innocent, it doesn't matter. He needs to have a fair trial. And that protects all of us. And if someone doesn't, then we're all in peril. It's not a free country. And Ross is not the only one, but at all. It's not unique. But
well, in Ross's case,
that's what I've learned. But anyway.
Yeah, well, in Ross's case, did his attorneys motion for some kind of retrial, or did they appeal, or?
Yeah.
Well,
yeah, no. Immediately after trial, because what happened was, the whole other huge part of the case is that everyone knew. I mean, not everyone. I didn't know, but Ross and his lawyers, plus the prosecution, plus the judge, pre-trial, all knew that there were corrupt agents who'd been stealing from the site, operating on the site as different aliases. They had the ability to operate as DPR. They had the ability to change anything on the site and the server, in both the marketplace and the chat, the forum. And it wasn't allowed to be known to the jury. These guys are now in prison. They're now in prison, and they only got 6 years. But in any case, it wasn't permitted, and that's a big part of the appeal. So right after the trial, because this all came out after the trial, there was a motion filed, which was denied by this judge for a retrial. But now we're right in the middle of an appeal. In fact, the defense just filed its final reply to the government on this past Monday, and you can read it on our documents page under the case on our website. And Brian Dougherty from Reason actually wrote a good overview. But in any case, yes, it's calling for retrial with a different judge. This trial was a travesty, and so yeah, we're right in the middle of all that.
Wow.
And the other thing is, the whole thing about these other, convicted, drug dealers on Silk Road, they brought in all kinds of other extraneous things, such as political speech that was on Silk Road. She used to bolster her sentence. This is using someone's free speech against them to give them a life sentence. This is unconstitutional. We have First Amendment rights. In addition, unproven, unconvicted charges of murder for hire that were based on chat with this corrupt agent who could have created the whole thing, I've been told. A lot of things like that. And at the sentencing, and so that's being challenged, as well as the allegation that 6 people died of drug overdoses from drugs they bought on Silk Road, which a pathologist of 30 years experience said there's no way you can prove that. And that wasn't in trial. They just brought it up in the sentencing, and are holding the website host responsible for those deaths, not the vendor, not the buyer. And just as a comparison, Amazon until 2013 sold cyanide, and knew they sold cyanide. They made money off selling cyanide. and a young teenage girl bought it and killed herself with it. Her mother is actually suing Amazon and the vendor. And this wasn't, Jeff Bezos has not been facing charges for hosting a site that sold cyanide. That's just one small example. I mean, Craigslist, it's a huge precedent to hold a website host responsible for everything on the site, including what's said on the site.
Yeah.
Which
That's
the
very...
judge referenced quotes from the site saying the government was the oppressor. She didn't say it was Ross saying it. She just said it was on the site, and so he was responsible and dangerous and troubling and need to be put away, basically.
Yeah.
For what was said on a site. That's really,
that is, yeah. And, certainly as that pertains to websites like Kazaa and other file sharing sites where people, traditionally went to share music, those types of sites were protected under what are called DMCA laws, and as long as the host was notified to take it down, and in fact they did take it down, they would be exonerated and not held liable. So it's interesting here to learn that that same standard was not applied. Wow.
Oh, yeah, that's I'm not sure who was informed, and all that. I don't know the details of that, but it's just there's no proportionality. I mean, and even today, there's websites operating in the open bazaar, where there is no control over what's bought and sold on there. And I've been told, I don't know, I don't go on it, that there's drugs being sold on there. And it's just thriving. And there's lots of sites like that are thriving. And one of the excuses for this barbaric sentence is, well, it'll be deterrent to other people doing it. Meanwhile, once she gave the sentence, it was like an explosion of sites. So that has proven quite untrue. The other point I want to make about the political thing, so I'm seeing him as a political prisoner. That Schumer was behind this whole thing. He was on the banking committee, and you originally asked me why. I believe the real reason, and this is just my opinion, is that a market operating on Tor with a cryptocurrency, with an alternate currency to what can be controlled and taxed, was not going to be tolerated.
Right.
And I really think that was the real motivation and the real threat. That's my personal opinion. But that makes Ross more of a political prisoner. And as the judge said, well, you're no better than any drug dealer on the street. And Cody Wilson tweeted, he goes, well, why didn't you sentence him then? Sentence him as a drug dealer then. Instead of drug dealers don't get that kind of sentence. It's all nonviolent. That's the other thing. And they put this kingpin charge on him based on nothing. I mean, there's no proof that he was. The kingpin has to manage, supervise, organize, be hands-on guy. As far as I know from the statute. I could be wrong. I'm not a lawyer. And as far as I know, no one was actually named. Everyone was anonymous. So no one was actually named as these 5 required employees or people that were controlled by the kingpin to get this charge. And yet he has a life sentence for being a kingpin. Now, when I think of a kingpin, I think of Pablo Escobar, who supposedly was responsible for 300 assassinations, 3,000 homicides.
Right.
Ross is a completely nonviolent, peaceful, no priors, and there's 100 letters on our website that from people who actually know Ross, attesting to his character, what he has contributed to them, what a good person he is, what a peaceful person he is. She just brushed those aside. They were all begging the judge, give him the mandatory minimum of 20 years. 20 years from now, Ross will be 52. Does she really believe that he'll come out when he's had no access to the Internet, because he's not allowed access to the Internet, that he's going to come out and build another Silk Road? I mean, of course it's absurd. And the Sentencing Reform Act says you give a sentence that's sufficient, but no greater than necessary. She never said why life was necessary. set up her own standards and reasons, like this First Amendment issue, and just said, I'm going to give you the worst possible sentence, the harshest possible sentence I can, which to me says she would have given him the death penalty if she could have. She just couldn't.
Oh my God! It really it gives you the chills. Yeah.
Yeah, it does. It's scary.
It gives you the chills just listening to it.
Yeah. It does.
Oh.
And the implications on the drug war, because this is a doubling down on the drug war. They're saying, no, we're not, even though the President of the United States, the Pope, Congress, all kinds of people are saying this drug war is a mess, it's terrible. Neil Franklin of LEAP, Law Enforcement Against Prohibition, he said it's the worst public policy since slavery because it has done more the drug policies are not just ineffective. They haven't stopped anyone from using drugs, as far as I know. But they're counterproductive, what he says, quote, counterproductive to public safety in our communities. They're actually more dangerous than drugs. And I'm not denying that. I'm not saying people should do drugs. I'm not for drugs. I'm not saying they're not dangerous, although a friend of mine just died of an overdose of alcohol, and I don't notice it calling for alcohol prohibition. There is a point where you have to realize we've learned from the alcohol prohibition and from 40 years of drug prohibition, it doesn't work.
So in your mind, would
you're a part of this whole effort. It doesn't work.
Absolutely. One of the challenges that we face, or certainly at least in theory that we like to think about, is how to structure different policies according to the severity of the implications of that drug. So, certainly we don't like to see marijuana being treated the same way as methamphetamine, but of course, equally, the more libertarian you are, and the more you just want the government to stay off of the topic, then the less divisive a policymaker should be, as he's kind of outlining different policies for different drugs. So I think, to a large extent, it really just comes down to why you think drugs should be legal, or whether or not you just don't want them to be illegal. So there's a lot of interesting policy discussions to be had about it, certainly.
Yeah, well, one of my questions is, where is the authority in the Constitution for the federal government to say anything about it?
Right. Well, I think
they did have an amendment for alcohol prohibition. I don't see an amendment. They just say they are.
Right.
And claim this authority, and that bothers me. In fact, I'm not really clear why we need a federal justice system at all. I thought it was supposed to be up to the states, and I think it's becoming it's becoming a Goliath, a Leviathan that is persecuting, our people, not just for drugs, but drugs is a big part of it. From what I've read, 60% of our prisons are now full of nonviolent, mostly drug offenders. This is, and from what I can see and where I've read, there's a lot of money being made.
The private police,
there's money being made over people, with people as the product. I call that human trafficking. I just don't, it is. People are the product. Prosecutors and judges are permitted to invest in private prisons. That's a conflict of interest. And, and it's not, it's a crony capitalism thing, because it's the private prisons and the public prisons. They're all making money.
Yeah.
And it's horrible, because I go to the prisons. I see the people. I see the children. It's so damaging. It's horrible. And these are nonviolent people.
How would you characterize the conditions of the prison where Ross is currently in?
Well, it's not a normal federal prison. It's a transitional facility in Lower Manhattan. So it doesn't have the amenities, you might say, or recreational abilities or outdoor access that I've heard regular federal prisons have. So I would say they're not as good. But that's because people aren't meant to stay there for years.
How long has he been there so far?
He's been there since a year ago, January, so that'd be January 15. But then he was in Brooklyn before that. He's been in prison for 2.5 years.
And have you
over 2.5 years now?
have you noticed
3 years in October 1st, so it's almost 3 years.
Hmm.
And he wanted to stay there because he doesn't have email and internet. He wanted to be able to work on the appeal with his lawyers. They're located everything is in New York City, and so if he weren't in New York City, it would be, how would he do it? He'd have to do it with snail mail, very difficult. And they granted that. So for now, and that was,
I see.
I'm glad, so he can work with the lawyers.
So do you feel that you've made any inroads or progress kind of doing what you're doing on a day-to-day basis, or even month-to-month, going to conferences, speaking to relevant people, making the case for Ross where he cannot?
I do think that has. I mean, initially, this murder for hire allegation, which was dropped by, they deprived him of bail with it, and then they dropped it in New York, and never brought it up at trial, except to say, oh yeah, this happened, but but we're not charging him with it. So you don't have to rule on it to the jury, and it was just like, wait a minute, you can do that? There is a indictment in Maryland that's been sitting there for almost 3 years. They haven't moved on it. I would like to either say, look, either prove it or drop it, and I'm not sure what's going to happen with it, but it was based on the testimony of a corrupt agent who's now in prison. So, this murder for hire allegation. So I'm kind of like, really? But anyway, so that was a big hurdle, and still is, where people not only think the murder for hire thing is true, they have changed it now to murder. They call it murder. There were no bodies. There was no murder of anyone. There were chats. That's all. And that, I'm sorry, digital evidence is extremely vulnerable to tampering. Well, those agents that were on Silk Road had every ability to change anything they wanted.
Right.
And chats, screenshots, these kinds of things have been thrown out by other courts. And in fact, the mortgage company won't take a screenshot of a bank statement because they know how easily faked it is. They want to see the original. There were no fingerprints, no witnesses, no DNA, nothing like that in this whole thing. It was pretty much all digital. And in fact, the only live witness said, Ross told me he sold the site. That was his testimony.
Oh my God.
That's another very scary precedent. All it takes is a computer and maybe Photoshop to create evidence. And I'm not accusing anyone of anything. I'm just saying that's there. That potential is there. And if this precedent is set, how convenient.
Yeah, the digital age really does kind of is forcing standard rules of evidence to kind of re-examine themselves, as what we traditionally relied on as solid means of proving something no longer kind of remains true, just as you're saying, because digitally evidence doesn't mean the same thing anymore as far as how it can be recreated, tampered, fabricated. It's a challenging subject.
Yep. It is, and one of the points in the appeal, and I do want to get back to the progress, one of the points in the appeal is a Fourth Amendment issue where they used general warrants to search through Ross's digital material on his laptop and his, Gmail and Facebook. And EFF, Electronic Frontier Foundation, as well as the National Association of Criminal Defense Lawyers, has joined the brief saying, wait a minute, general warrants are unconstitutional. That is one of the reasons we fought the Revolutionary War, because the Fourth Amendment has particularity requirements saying, I'm looking for this particular file. Not, I'm going to look through your whole house, attic to basement, see what I can find against you. And this is basically Ross's digital house. And the government's going, oh no, digital doesn't count. It's not protected. That's basically what they're saying. And even if it is, we operated in good faith, and so it's all okay. And this is a big question for the digital age, because who has a physical file cabinet? I have one tiny little thing. Everything's on my computer. Everything's on, we all are like that. So they're saying it's not really protected. And it's being addressed in the courts right now, and it's being argued and decided, and it's and including this case. And it's I find that's one of the most important issues, that and the fair trial. But to get back to progress, it has been, so we started out with this, overcoming this smear that was unproven, uncharged, and I think we've made progress. It's not, completely, and sometimes it's very difficult, because a lot of the media, not all of it, just echoes either what the government says or what each other says, and I find their coverage quite shallow. Not everyone, but a lot of it, and inaccurate. I'm constantly seeing inaccuracies. For instance, the cover of Newsweek, they covered this story, said there were assassinations on Silk Road. There weren't. That's one example, just one of many, many, and that's the cover of Newsweek. So,
and do you feel that there was some sort of collusion? In your mind, do you feel that the media has somehow sided with the government? And if
I don't know if it's a plan thing. I don't know. I think that they do depend a lot on what the government says, and I believe they also, I've been told, I should say, that they don't want to cut off access to the government in terms of information, so they're not going to dig too deeply, maybe, or it seems like they don't want to dig too deeply. That what they're after, it seems to me, in many cases, not all, I really want to say that because there's some really good people, is sensationalism. So how many clicks they're going to get if they talk about murder, if they talk about, drugs. And that's what they seem like they're mostly focused on. As far as getting the word out, that's not all of that at conferences, speeches, trying to get on the internet. And, of course, I'm doing the lion's share of all this, and I'm, first of all, very low tech. Second of all, I'm rather old for this. But I'm doing it, and I'm getting help, a lot more help now, which is great. Trying to learn all this stuff,
Yeah.
It's like a whole new world for me, and language even. And, if you had told me I was going to be speaking at a hackers conference 3 years ago, I'd been like, what's a hackers conference?
Yeah.
Or like, how do you get on Twitter? But it has really been helpful. For instance, the indications that it has is that I feel like a lot of libertarians distance themselves from us initially because of this implication of planned violence, and now see that the government's allegations for what they are. So I spoke at the Texas Libertarian Convention. I spoke at the National Libertarian Convention. I spoke at Freedom Fest, which is a big libertarian conference, huge, which shows the fact that they wanted me to speak, that they're accepting. And actually, the Freedom Fest team came out and pledged its support for us. And I actually have a conference call with them today about maybe a fundraiser to help pay for these gargantuan legal fees and other fees. So I feel like the acceptance by you might call it the libertarian establishment or something, I think that shows a shift. Gary Johnson saying he would pardon Ross. He told me that twice to my face personally. Very nice man, very concerned and compassionate man. And he said, I will pardon him. And then when I saw him again, he said, I want to tell you I'm keeping that pledge. And John McAfee, who was running for the nomination of the Libertarian Party, said on film, which of course I pardon him, So I feel like being accepted by people, high-profile libertarians like that, shows us acceptance by the community, which has made a big difference. And then there's other people.
Yeah.
I think the Deep Web documentary has helped open people's minds and at least ask questions.
Well, have you also reached out to people in the current Obama administration or other relevant left-leaning figures who might be more sympathetic to the end on the war on drugs and trying to see if they would also be instrumental in helping compel the right people to release him? Have you made any inroads on that?
No, could use some help on that. You want to help me?
I wish I was qualified to do it. Yeah.
It's difficult to get attention, and so I haven't reached President Obama. I do commend him on pardoning so many people.
Right.
Attention to the issue. I have found the way to reach people besides just going up to them in person if you happen to see them, at a conference, and waiting to see them through the crowd and everything, is contacting people who can contact people, kind of thing. And we are going to start a petition. It won't be in time for him. I haven't made inroads there. He's pardoned a lot of people, but there's also thousands and thousands left. And so I think it's worth a try, but I haven't pursued that. Haven't yet.
Wow. Well, thank you so much for your time, Lyn. We're going to start wrapping it up, but I just want to know if there's anything else that you really feel like you want to get out or say or tell people, or how do you want people to leave this podcast besides feeling kind of a little maybe sad and demoralized?
Oh, no. Well, look, I really think we're at a crossroads in history right now. In the courts, there's uncharted waters. They're making decisions now about the digital age and about drugs that are going to affect all of us. And, especially to your listeners, I would guess that most of them are against the drug war. And, I don't even think the drug war is about drugs. I think it's about government expansion and intrusion in our lives. And I would, we're just one family. I'm just one person.
Right.
And who has help. And we need help. So I'd like to say that if you're against the drug war, this is a battle in that war. And Ross is a prisoner of war. And to win this appeal would be a really strong pushback to that war. They made it very clear that's what their sentence was. They were going to get an example, a trophy, to warn people against the drug war. Supporting the drug war, and as a threat, basically. And we're trying to push back, and we need your help. And financially, we need help. And you can go to freeross.org and donate. There's a cool game based on an art piece Ross did. It's the second one. That it's you can, for $1, you can help reveal the artwork. It's really fun. There's other options as well. There's a tax-deductible option that helps prisoners' defense, including Ross's appeal. There's different things. So that, but also any connections, like suggestions, we have a volunteer form if you want to help us in any particular way. We really would welcome it. We really need help here. It's a very crucial time in history. I really think it's pivotal, and this is a way to focus in on some really important issues.
Wow. Well, there it is, another victim of the war on drugs. Hopefully this will be resolved soon. As you said, the implications for Ross's case, of course, are far-reaching and impact many of our liberties and social rights, and kind of speak to some of the most fundamental ways in which the government interacts with the individual. So we wish you the best of luck, Lyn.
Thank you so much.
We'd love to have you back on. It's our hearts, our prayers, they go out to Ross and your family, and we hope it will be resolved quickly and justly.
Yeah, especially justly.
Especially justly.
But no, thank you so much for the opportunity to talk about it.
Okay, Lyn. Well, we will be speaking to you soon. Please stay in touch with the firm, and good luck to you.
Thanks. Thank you.
Okay, Lyn.
Appreciate the support. Okay.
Bye.
Bye.
Well, that was another podcast with THC Legal Group. Lyn is struggling with something real, meaningful, something that could affect all of us, and we are forced to contend with some of these essential questions. What should the government be doing? How should they be interfacing with us? How should they be regulating our drug use? That's all for today. THCLegalGroup.com.